Hello, good morning, good evening, and welcome everyone to Algebra webinar in which we're going to learn how you can master algebra, and applying those principles you can master any section in quant as well. So in order to make sure that you are well prepared for this session, because this is a very application-oriented webinar, we have shared these with concept files with you, and I hope that all of you had a chance to go through them. Just by show of hands, I'm actually going to ask you a question. How many of you have gone through these videos? Or let's say at least one or two of those videos. Okay, so so about 40% of the class has gone through at least one of these videos. All right, so I would urge everyone to go through these videos after the session is over so that you can build your conceptual understanding of these concepts. And again, these are part of your free trial, so you can access them from your e-GMAT account in case you are not as yet a quant student. Now, every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we conduct webinars so that you are well prepared for taking the test. And next Saturday, Rajat is going to be going over how is it that you should be creating your own personalized study plan in order to score 99 percentile on the test. So if you haven't as yet registered for this webinar, or if you haven't as yet attended this webinar in the past, definitely register for it by clicking the button here. Now, just to make sure that everyone is, just to make sure that I understand what the makeup of this class is, we urge everyone to put in their responses to this question: when do you plan to take the test? And this just helps us contextualize the makeup of the class. So if you haven't already put in your responses, I would request you all to do so right now. So the largest segment here is actually more than 50% of the class plans to take the test beyond 45 days. Okay. Now there is a pretty big chunk of the class that's going to take the test within the next 45 days. So there's something or the other for everyone in this session to learn. And again, as you proceed through the session, you will be able to gain insights on how is it that you can master quant. And we're going to be taking examples of algebra concepts. So I'm going to be changing the layout in a bit, and it's going to take a couple of seconds for the layout to get stabilized at your end. So when you start to see algebra on your screen, algebra quant live session, that means that the screen has stabilized. So please click on yes if you can see algebra quant live session on your screen. All right, sounds good. So it has stabilized. Very nice. Now this session is split into three parts, and I apologize, I haven't introduced myself as yet. My name is Payal Tandon. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT. With me I have Ashutosh Mishra. He's a quant subject matter expert at e-GMAT. And then I have Komal, and she's the GMAT strategy expert at e-GMAT. Now whatever questions I ask of you, I would want you to put the responses to those questions in the polls that I show you. This is a kind of poll that you've already interacted with. Any questions that you have for me or for Ashutosh and Komal, please put them in the Q&A pod. Now again, since it's a very heavily attended session, I may not be able to take all the questions that you ask me, but Ashutosh and Komal will be able to help you out through the Q&A pod. Okay. All right, so there are three parts to this webinar. In the first part, I give you a brief introduction of e-GMAT as a company and the philosophy behind our courses. And the second part of the session is the main subject matter part of the session, in which I go over the strategies to master algebra and hence quant. And then towards the end, it's going to be an open-ended Q&A in which I will be taking your questions. Now, how many of you plan to score 720 or above? Almost everyone, right? There's not even a single person who has said, no, I don't plan to score 720 or above. Now, if you go to MBA.com and look at the stats, you will realize that only 6% of all GMAT test takers score 720 or higher. Another thing that you will realize is that the median GMAT score at most top B schools has been going up for the last few years. Just this year, you can see the median scores at these top schools have increased. So why is it that only 6% of people score 720 or higher? Okay, the reason for that is what is it that these students do? These students who do score 720 or higher, okay, a good percentage of these students study with e-GMAT. And why do I say that? If you take a look at some of the stats, you will come to the same conclusion. Let's take a look at the number of verified reviews on GMAT Club. e-GMAT, Magoosh, Veritas Prep, and Manhattan Prep are 4 of the top test prep companies in the GMAT prep space. When you take a look at the number of verified reviews, you will find that e-GMAT has more verified reviews than all of these companies combined. And what are verified reviews? These are reviews posted after October of 2015 or about 3 years ago and have been verified using an enhanced score report or a verified GC membership, that is GMAT Club membership. Similarly, if you take a look at the success stories written on GMAT Club's Share GMAT Experience, you will find a very similar story. e-GMAT has been mentioned more frequently in these stories than the next 3 most popular test prep companies. And the links for both of these are included over here, so I would definitely want you to verify these links for yourself. Okay. Now, what makes our students more successful? It's really the architecture of our courses or the distinct approach that we have towards GMAT prep. Now, to understand that, it's very important to understand what are the different kinds of learning architectures available in the literature today. There are 2 different architectures. The first one, which is the most common architecture, is the book-based architecture. The second one is the private tutoring-based architecture. Now, if you compare online prep companies today, most of them are centered around the book-based architecture. Now, you may argue, well, I know that Magoosh offers video lessons, then how can you say that they are book-based architecture? And I'm going to prove that to you. Yes, they have added videos, but at the core, their architecture is same as that of a book-based approach. Okay. e-GMAT, on the other hand, is built around a private tutoring-based architecture. Okay. Now let's see what's the difference between these 2 architecture and why is that one architecture has a higher success rate than the other. Now, to understand this, it's important to set a baseline for how is it that you score that 720 or higher. Okay, to get the score of 720 or higher, the first thing you need to do is create a personalized path towards your goal. Then you need to make sure that you learn all the concepts that you don't know. Okay. Then you need to learn how to apply these concepts. And finally, you need to confirm that you have attained a level of mastery that you can actually score 720, okay, or that you can perform better than 94% of the test takers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this architecture plays out in a book-based approach. A book-based approach is all about autonomy. In this architecture, you get a lot of learning material and possibly some mocks. However, the key decisions on how to go about doing your prep are completely up to you. For example, in a book-based approach, you create your own study plan. You create a schedule and you study concepts. And while studying concepts, you make a decision as to whether you have attained that level of mastery sufficient enough to move forward. Once you've learned the concepts, you practice questions. Why? Because books don't focus as much on teaching you how to apply the concepts. You typically learn application by practicing questions, which is why people who prepare using books believe in practicing and tend to solve thousands of questions. Now, once you've solved some questions, you then take the mocks to evaluate where you need to focus. Once again, the onus of analysis and decision making lies completely onto you. Okay. Now let's compare that to a private tutoring architecture. Okay. It works slightly differently. A good private tutor also begins with a study plan. Okay. But in order to create a study plan that is personalized to you, he first evaluates your strengths and weaknesses to create the fastest path to your goal. Ultimately, time is currency here. Once you have this personalized study plan, your tutor then teaches you concepts, evaluating you constantly in the process. Okay, that's the key thing over here, evaluating you constantly. Okay. Now, once you've learned a few concepts, then the tutor teaches you how to apply these concepts in a methodical manner. And this cycle of learning concepts and reinforcing application continues for some time. And after that, the tutor typically carries out focused evaluation to evaluate your mastery of concepts. Okay. In the event that you reach a level of mastery, you move on. Otherwise, the tutor creates a mini revision plan for you. Okay. So how do these approaches compare? While you learn the same concepts in both these approaches, there are two key differences between them. One, the private tutoring-based approach is a lot more personalized, starting with the study plans and the constant evaluation at each stage. Second, the extent of application that you learn in a private tutoring-based approach is significantly higher. So now I'm going to tell you how is it that I can claim that e-GMAT has the private tutor approach. Okay. Now we'll start with step 1, which is personalized study plan. Now let's say you're someone who is at 600 and whose goal is to reach a score of 720. Okay. What is the first thing that you're going to do at e-GMAT? You're going to utilize gmatplanner.com to create your own personalized study plan. This is the AI utility that we have created so that you can create a very, very milestone-oriented study plan. And I'm going to walk you through how you can do that, because this is the first and the foremost step that each one of you needs to do. How many of you have created a personalized study plan utilizing GMAT Planner or the PSP? At e-GMAT, how many of you have that today? Okay, so about half of the class or half of the students who have responded. Okay, the first thing that I want you to do after the session is create your personalized study plan, because that's the most important step in your prep. Okay, so now based on your input, so we basically, you need to start off with what your starting scores are. Okay, so once you get your starting scores between quant and verbal. Okay, once you get your starting scores, we then give you, based on your inputs, we then tell you what the recommended quant and verbal scores are that will get you to that 720 score. Okay, now beyond that, once you decide, okay, that you want to score a Q50 and a V38 in order to get to that 720, we then help you figure out how is it that you can get to that Q50. What is that Q50 composed of? Okay, and that's where this AI utility is going to help you decide which combination of arithmetic and algebra percentiles are you going to select in order to get to Q50. Now in this case, you have 3 different combinations possible. Okay, you can either absolutely ace arithmetic or absolutely ace algebra, or you can do decently well in both arithmetic and algebra. Okay, or yeah, so you have 3 different categories there, and depending upon your personal preference, you select which category which combination you want to go towards. Okay. In this case, we've decided that this student is going to do really well in both arithmetic and algebra. He's not going to ace anyone. He's not going to aim for that 95 percentile in arithmetic or algebra, but he's going to do decently well in both the sections in order to score a Q50. Likewise, the V38 is no longer just a V38. In order to score V38, the student decides that, okay, I am going to master both SC and CR to almost similar levels, but I'm not going to worry as much about my my RC as much. Okay, so now that you have this level of clarity, what you have are absolutely clear milestones that are going to get you from that Q44 to that Q50. Right now the student is at 59 in arithmetic. He needs to go to an 83 percentile, while the student is at 39 in algebra and he wants to go to 83 percentile. Likewise, he has very balanced scores in all SC, CR, RC, but he plans to master SC and CR and do decently well in RC. Okay, and when you have this level of clarity, right, the system tells you that, okay, how much time is it going to take for you to get from your current score to your target score in a well-defined set of 5 milestones. So now your journey towards that 720 from that 600 is no longer a black box in which you study, and then towards the end you take a mock only to realize, oh, I didn't improve as much in this section or in that section. Now your journey towards your GMAT is very well deterministic journey that you start from your individual milestones in each of the 5 subsections. Okay. And this is something which I want all of you to create after the session, because this is the most important step in your GMAT prep. Not only that, you can now enter number of hours that you plan on spending each and every day through your start date till your GMAT test date. The system tells you when is it an appropriate time for you to take the test, right? So you can do all of that time planning. Let's say you have decided to take a vacation on a day, on a working day, which means you can spend more than 2 hours on that day, then you can simply go in over there and change those hours. Okay. So again, we've spent thousands of hours to create this utility so that you can create this personalized study plan in fewer than 7 minutes. All right, so after you are done with that, what's the next step? The next step is to learn the concepts, and that's where the e-GMAT course comes into picture. If you take a look at this is a screenshot of our course, and I'll focus on divisibility and remainders concept. Okay, now what you're going to see over here is that I'm going to show you a screenshot of one of these concepts, but let's take a look at that. What you're going to see is a very audio-visual file, and with detailed video solutions of each and every concept. Okay, you basically understand each and everything. You learn a lot better if you see and hear things rather than just read things. Not only that, as you learn the concepts, you also get practice questions right there and then in the similar format on the same application, so that you can apply the learnings that you've had in the previous slides and figure out, okay, can I really apply what I've learned. Okay. By contrast, if you take a look at divisibility concept on Magoosh, this is how it looks like. Okay, it's almost like reading from a textbook. It's very verbose. There is no interactivity. It's a very passive learning environment. Now, after you learn the concepts, you go through the application of those concepts, and that's where we have these application files. You see the divisibility application quiz, you see the remainders application quiz, and then you see the appropriate practice quizzes that are based on those individual application quizzes. Not only that, you see OG quizzes, official guide quizzes with detailed e-GMAT solutions, so that you can solve those questions utilizing the process that you have learned. Okay. And this is how each and every module, whether it's in quant course or verbal course, is architected. Okay. By contrast, if you take a look at Magoosh course, there is only one practice file with 5 questions, and this file is common across all these concepts that you see right above it. Okay. And the score that you see on the dashboard is not for this dashboard. Okay, all the timings that you see over here, these are not the time that you took in order to learn those concepts. These are the times that these are the lengths of each and every file. By contrast, the time that you see on the e-GMAT screen is the time that you spent, so that you know, have you spent right amount of time to go through those concepts. Okay. Now, the last step over here is to figure out, have you improved or not, right? Have you attained that level of mastery? Now, how do you figure that out? Because this is an iterative process. Now, for you to figure that out, we have created Scholaranium. Now, what does Scholaranium give you? Scholaranium tells you where exactly you are lacking. Now, this student takes a quiz in algebra in Scholaranium platform, and he sees that he is decently well in quadratic equations and exponents, but he has to really work hard on inequalities and functions. So now the student knows exactly where to focus on in order to get to that score. Okay, and that's the beauty of Scholaranium. So if you think about it, you can understand, if you put all of this into context, you can understand why e-GMAT is a lot more like a private tutor than a book, and you can create all the extensive architecture But in order to make it truly impactful, you also need to have good instructors. And at e-GMAT, we have some of the best instructors that you're going to find in the business. In fact, 4 out of GMAT Club's top 5 instructors work for e-GMAT. Instructors who not only work full-time in helping you ace the test, but also have been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club. Now, if you put all of this into context, you can understand that it's not a surprise that only 6% of individuals score 720 or higher, and most of them study with us. So I would want everyone to connect with Rajat on e-GMAT so that you can connect with top business school consultants and admission directors, as well as meet upwards of, I think, 13,000 students. All right, so with this, we've come to the end of the first part of this webinar, and now we're going to be moving into the second part, in which I'm going to be teaching you how do you apply concepts in the context of GMAT, okay? Now, all the basic concepts have been covered in the concept files, which I know more or less than 50% of you have gone through them. So I cannot guarantee that I can go through all the concepts in detail, because that's not the intent of this webinar, but I'll definitely mention those concepts to you so that you know what concepts you definitely need to go back into the course and revise. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing, we're going to focus on the process of solving questions. So even if you're not clear on a certain concept, just take that on its face value and focus on the application part, because that's what I'm going to be teaching you in this session. And I want you to note down all the key takeaways, whether they are from conceptual standpoint or from your process standpoint, okay, so that you know exactly how is it that you want to prepare after this session, okay? And I am going to be highlighting certain gaps in your prep, so definitely make a note of that, okay? Now, how is this session going to go on? These are the topics that we are going to cover: linear inequalities, quadratic inequalities, absolute value equations, and absolute value inequalities. Now, how many of you are absolutely comfortable, or let's say more than 80% comfortable in these concepts? All right, so less than 50% of the class is more than 80% confident in these concepts. Okay, that's fine. We'll try to change that as we proceed through the session. Now, we are going to begin with a warm-up quiz. Okay, now in this warm-up quiz, I'm just going to make sure that we're just going to test your conceptual understanding of these concepts. That's absolutely required for you to do a higher order application of those concepts. So we're going to take this warm-up quiz. You'll get some good level of feedback on your conceptual understanding. Then we're going to apply these in the context of the GMAT. We're going to do 6 problem-solving questions and 3 data sufficiency questions. Okay, now, because data sufficiency questions require a higher level of understanding, I want to first make sure that you can solve the problem-solving questions, and then as your understanding improves, we then move on to the DS questions. Okay? So we'll get started with the warm-up section now. Again, these are basic questions on algebra, and I'm going to be giving you feedback on your current understanding of the concepts. Okay? Now, one thing that I want to tell everyone is that how do I give you the questions? The first thing is that okay, I have a question here from a student. Higher level of understanding is required for data sufficiency, and I have fewer questions. Yes, I only have limited amount of time in this session, right? So again, the point over here is that as you gain your understanding of concepts and how do you apply those concepts on problem-solving questions, you are going to see that your ability to answer data sufficiency questions is also going to improve. Okay, so that's the whole point, for you to understand not to put DS questions in a separate category altogether from PS questions. Just understand that it's all a progressive learning architecture. Okay. All right. So the question about how I solve questions in this session. When I ask you to solve the question, I want you to first click on still solving. because that tells me that that gives me an indication as to how many people are actively engaged in the session in solving the question. And then once about 50% of the class has put in the responses, I give you either a 10-second warning or a 30-second warning, depending upon how complicated the question is. Okay, so I don't want to put a time constraint on you right off the bat. I just let the make the class itself kind of set the amount of time that you will be getting to solve the questions. Okay, all right, let's move on. This is the first question here. Let's go on. All right, last 10 seconds. I'm going to end this poll now. Let's do question number 2, and we'll discuss the answers after the first 3 questions. Let's click on still solving, please. All right, here you go. Question number 2. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And now, question number 3 in the warm-up section. Please click on still solving. All right, here you go. All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, now let's discuss the answers here, starting from the first question. So first question, almost everyone got it right. Again, we have to simply, this is a very basic question, a question on how to solve inequalities. You move minus y to the left side. You basically put the like terms together and then simply solve this. So you get y is greater than minus 2. Okay, so again, almost everyone got this question right. Now, for those of you who didn't, I want you to make sure that you learn the basics in inequalities. Okay, so again, make sure that you do work on the basics first. Okay, now let's take a look at second question here. Now, in this question, things started to get a bit interesting. Okay, again, this question also requires you to know how to solve inequalities. Okay, what we need to find out is what is the range of values of y if given the two inequalities. Okay, so you have to solve a system of linear inequalities. And how do you do that? Basically, again, try to bring both the equations, both the inequalities in the same form. Then you add the two inequalities. Again, you have to bring them in the standard form. What you get is y is greater than minus 2. So the only thing that you're doing over here is you are trying to, you're bringing both the inequalities in the same form in order to make sure that you can do operations on them. Okay. Now, why is it that you got this question wrong? I'm going to get a poll question here. What did you not understand in this? Let me get the short answer poll here. Because about 40% of the class didn't get this question right. So I want to understand why that is the case. At what step did you falter? Just missed to click. Okay, that's fine. Calculation mistake. What kind of calculation mistake? There aren't that many calculations. I didn't have paper and pen. Okay, I urge everyone to get a paper and pen. Okay, the reversal of the negative sign. Okay. Okay, now let's take a look at the third question here. Okay. So again, over here, there is no reversal that's going on. Over here, you're simply bringing the two inequalities in the same form. You're making sure that the sign of the inequality is the same for you to apply, for you to do operations on them. Okay. This is where question number 3 is where things start to get interesting. Okay. A little bit more interesting. Now here, the correct answer is choice C. Okay. 3 is the correct answer. But I believe people who marked B didn't falter on the algebra part of it, but faltered on understanding what the question is telling us. So let me show you the solution here first. So you add both the inequalities, okay, and what you get is minus 4m is greater than minus 10. Now this is where some of you made the mistake. How many of you think that if minus 4m is greater than minus 10, then 4m is greater than 10? How many of you think that? Okay, and that is the right answer. This is not correct. If minus 4m is greater than minus 10, then you cannot get that 4m is greater than 10. Why is that? Because you need to change the sign of inequality. Whenever you multiply by a negative number, the sign of inequality needs to change. So the correct answer here will be 4m is less than 10. What you get is m is less than 10 by 4, and I apologize for that little mess up of the fonts there. And what you get is that m is less than 2.5. Now, what are all the non-negative integral values of m that that makes sure that that happens, that m is less than 2.5, is 0, 1, and 2. Okay. Is everyone clear with this? The main point where you faltered over here was that 4m minus 4m is greater than minus 10 does not lead to simple cancellation of the negative sign. You always have to change the sign of inequality whenever you multiply you multiply both sides of inequality with a negative number. So now 4m is less than 10 for you to cancel out the negative sign. Okay, which means m is less than 10 by 4, which is equal to 2.5, which means the non-negative integral values of m are 0, 1, and 2. Now 0 is a non-negative integer. Okay, if the question was a positive integer, then yes, the correct answer would have been 2, but in this case what you've been asked is non-negative integer. Okay, so now tell me, where did you all falter? This question has a very low accuracy. Only 28% of the class selected the right answer. So tell me, what step did you falter at? Missed 0 as a non-negative integer. Okay, missed 0. Good. What else? Question made no sense. Okay, I hope that you can understand it now. I didn't consider 0, considered only 1 and 2. Okay. Didn't add the two inequalities. Okay, so what you can see is that if you faltered in the previous question, question number 2, where you had to process the two inequalities, then you will falter in this question as well. You can see how one concept is being tested in multiple questions, and we are adding on to the complexity of the question by adding more concepts to be applied, right? But if you don't understand the basic of the concepts, then you won't be able to solve the questions that are in the progressive that increase in progress, that progressively increase in difficulty level. And that's why it's very important to make sure that you learn the concepts really well as you move forward to higher difficulty level concepts. Okay, and that's the whole point of the progressive learning architecture. Okay. Now I have a question here that the slide says integral, but in the explanation I'm saying integer. Well, integral values means integer values. Okay, it's just another way of saying non-negative integral values means non-negative integer values. Okay. Okay, there is no difference. So there were two people who asked that question. There is no difference between the two. Okay. All right. Let's now move on to our next question, and here is the poll for that. Can you all please click on still solving? Here you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Here is question number 5. We leave the last question in the warm-up section. No, there's one more question after that. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So what kind of questions were questions 4 and 5? What kind of inequalities? They were new inequalities, quadratic inequalities. Yes, they were quadratic inequalities. All right. So let's go through question number 4. What is the range of x for the inequality x minus 2 into x minus 3 greater than 0? Now the key to solving quadratic inequalities is to basically get them in this form. Now in this case, this inequality is already in the factored form, right? This is what we call as the factorized form. And now all you have to do is understand when two numbers are multiplied, when is their product greater than 0? When is the product greater than 0? There are two cases. Either both the numbers are positive or both the numbers are negative, right? Those are the two cases in which the product is greater than 0. Now, when is x minus 2 and x minus 3? So when x minus 2 is greater than 0, this means that x is greater than 2. When x minus 3 is greater than 0, that means that x is greater than 3. Now, if you combine both these ranges of x, what you get is for x minus 2 and x minus 3 both to be positive, right? You have to make sure that x is greater than 3, right? So that's the value that you get over here. Now, there is another case, that's the range that you get here. The other case in which both are negative, you again do the same thing. X is less than 2, x is less than 3. Combining both the inequalities, the range that you get for x in which both x minus 2 and x minus 3 are negative is x is less than 2. Now, when you combine these two together, you get the range of x for this inequality, and that is in choice C. Now, minus infinity to 2, that's the set that tells you that x is less than 2. 3 to infinity, that's the set that corresponds to x is greater than 3. Okay? So that's the correct answer over here, choice C. And about, let me get the poll for that question here, question number 4. Choice C, about 53% of the class selected that choice. Okay. Now I have a question here. When it asks for range, which one to consider, the positive range or the negative range? Both the ranges. And that's what the answer has, both the ranges. You have, when you say range, it means all the values of x for which this inequality exists, stands true. Okay. Negative infinity is nothing but when you say x is less than 2, that means that x can be anywhere from negative infinity up to 2. That's what we mean by that. Okay, so if you have confusion about how to express inequalities in terms of the sets, the way they appear right now, definitely look at the concept files so that your understanding can be enhanced. Okay, now let's take a look at Okay, now this is another method which I'm not going to be teaching you right now, but I'm going to be giving you an article later on in the webinar so that you can learn this wavy line method. Now this wavy line method is nothing but the application of what we talked about, that you understand how in what scenarios this quadratic inequality holds true, the application of that in terms of applying, getting to the answer quickly. Okay, so it's basically a method that's based on the very principles that we discussed in the previous slide. Now, on and off, I'm just going to give you a disclaimer. On and off, I will refer to the solution utilizing the wavy line method, but I don't expect you guys to know the method right away. Okay, when I do reference the solution utilizing wavy line method, that's an indication to you that after the session you need to go through that wavy line method and make sure that you learn the application of that. Remember, this is an application focused session and wavy line method is really a concept, right? So I will reference the method, but I'm saying that with a disclaimer that that after the session, definitely go and review the wavy line method so that you can understand how to apply it. Okay. Okay. Let's now go to question number 5. Now, question number 5 is a very interesting question. How many of you were able to tell that this question is a quadratic question, quadratic inequalities question? How many of you were able to tell right away that this is a quadratic inequality? Okay, about 60% of the class. All right, now tell me, for those of you who were not able to identify this as a quadratic inequality, again, this is a learning point for you. Okay, you need to make a note of it. Whenever you see, the one thing that I want all of you to be clear about is the test makers are not going to throw anything at you that you cannot handle. So when you do see weird looking expressions or expressions that are not simplified, that are not translated into the form that you are used to seeing, that's a big enough clue for you to see how you can bring that expression or those expressions into the form that is familiar to you. Okay. Now, in this case, x minus 3 divided by x plus 4, you can definitely bring it in a form of quadratic inequality. And again, if you weren't able to do that upfront, that means that you need to learn the skill. Okay, how to bring it in the known form. Okay, now in this case, one thing which may appeal to some of you is, let me just take x plus 4 on the other side, such that I get a linear inequality, x minus 3 is less than 0. How many of you did that? How many of you did that? That I simply take x plus 4 on the other side and I get x minus 3 is less than 0. Quite a few of you. That is not right. Why? Because how many of you know for sure that x is greater than or equal to, that x is greater than, that x plus 4 is positive? How many of you are absolutely sure that x plus 4 is positive? We are not sure about that, right? Because we don't know anything about the value of x. Right? And that's the reason why you cannot multiply both sides by x plus 4, because we don't know if x plus 4 is positive or negative. Okay. However, what we can do is we can multiply both sides by x plus 4 whole square. Why can we do that? Because x plus 4 whole square is positive always, or non-negative always. Okay, so we can multiply both sides by x plus 4 whole square, and what that gives us is, that gives us a quadratic inequality. And now we simply apply either the method that we used earlier or the wavy line method. I'm just going to show you the wavy line method here, and the answer that you get is minus 4 comma 3. Okay. So what did you guys learn from these two questions, questions 4 and 5, before we move on to the next question? What did you learn about your skill level in quadratic inequalities? Need to learn the wavy line method, not to do assumptions, no skill, need to improve. Okay, and again, one thing that I do want to tell you all is, it's okay for you to not be able to solve questions right now. It's absolutely fine. I don't want you guys to feel disheartened about it. Okay, right now all we are doing is we are understanding and giving you the right kind of questions, right, so that you can understand where is it that you need to focus on, or you can understand, okay, I don't need to focus on these things, I know these concepts very well. Okay, either which way, whatever feedback you are getting from these questions, you need to take that feedback, make sure that you know how to take that feedback and apply that feedback in your quant prep. Okay, now I do have a question. Can I please explain more about the wavy lines? I cannot right now, because again, that's outside the scope of this session, but believe me, trust me on this. Okay, when you go through the article that I will share with you, you will be able to understand that. Okay, right now the feedback that I want you to take from this is that you need to learn the wavy line method, and that is a very good enough feedback. Okay, all right. Now this is the last question over here in the warm-up section. Can you please click on still solving? All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and broadcast the results. Now this is an absolute value inequality. Now again, the main thing over here is that you the easy way to solve this is that you substitute x plus 3 is equal to z, right? And then what you get is mod of z is less than or equal to 5, right? So this becomes your inequality here. And how is this inequality? It's basically, so again, you can either visualize this on the number line, or you can basically see that, okay, what the inequality is minus 5 is less than or equal to z is less than or equal to 5 after visualizing it on the number line. Now you substitute x plus 3, z as x plus 3, and then you move the numbers appropriately, and what you get is minus 8 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 2. Okay, so a very straightforward absolute value inequality question. Now, how many of you were able to solve this question? Okay, good. So the correct answer is choice C. About 66% of the class was able to get this question correct. Now, for those of you who were not able to get it correct, again, it's a conceptual gap. You can easily fix that gap. Go through the absolute value inequality concept file in the course, and it's also available in the free trial. Okay. All right. So with this, we've come to the end of the warm-up section. And here is, so my feedback to all of you is, for those of you who scored less than 100%, actually, how many of you got at least one question wrong in these 6 questions? Okay, so my feedback to you is revise the appropriate concepts. Okay, you know which concepts you faltered on. I want you to make sure that you revise those concepts, learn those concepts really well before you move forward to solve any difficult questions. Now, obviously, in this session, we are going to move forward, but again, I want you to get as many insights as you can get from process standpoint when we solve those questions. Okay, so that's the whole point. Now, this is a wavy line method application. This is the link here, and I want all of you to go through this article over here so that you can learn about the wavy line method. Okay. Ashutosh, can you share the link of this method on the Q&A pod as well with everybody so that everyone has this link with them? All right. So now let's get into our GMAT style questions, and we'll begin with 600 to 700 level questions. Okay, so now we are going to slowly start applying each of these concepts. Now, here is the question, and let me get the poll here. Okay, let's click on have not solved yet. All right, here you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Good job, everyone. 71% accuracy in this question, so that's really good. Let's take a look at this question here. Linear inequality, relatively straightforward. We need to rearrange the terms here. We need to find the range of x. There's no constraint on the value of x, okay, or on x. Now we rearrange the terms. What we get is minus 32x is greater than 64. The main point that you had to keep in mind was that you flip the sign of the inequality when you take away the negative sign. So basically, when you're multiplying both sides by a negative number, you need to flip the sign of inequality. So what you get over here is, again, 32x is less than minus 64, which means x is less than minus 2. For anyone who selected choice B, you did not flip the sign of the inequality. That's why you faltered. Okay, the correct answer is x is less than minus 2, and choice C is the correct answer. Okay, so relatively straightforward. Now let's take a look at question number 2. Now in question number 2, I have a system of two linear inequalities. The first linear inequality is the same as the previous one, so you can take the solution from your previous question, that is x is less than minus 2 is the solution for the first linear inequality. You obviously need to solve the second linear inequality there. Okay, so that's a clue for you. And I'm going to take away the polls here. Can you please click on still solve, have not solved yet? All right. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Last 10 seconds. Okay. Very interesting question and a very good learning for you. You may think that the learning is not that significant, but when I tell you the learning, you're going to see, oh my goodness, why did I make that mistake? So I'll say one thing, that 86% of the class was able to solve the inequalities part of this question. Okay, no problems at all. You were able to get to the solution, and let me show you. And let me show you. From the first inequality, we get that x is okay. So most of you were able to, what's going on here? Yeah, most of you were able to get to this part over here. Goodness, okay. That x is greater than or equal to minus 5.5 and x is less than minus 2. Okay, but the place where you faltered was that you didn't consider the constraint on the value x. Okay, over here, what is the minimum value of the integer x? It's an integer. Okay, so for those of you who selected choice A, you missed out on that constraint. And 50% of the class selected choice A. So this is a very, very important process skill, which is to identify and apply the constraints that are provided to you or the conceptual constraints that exist. Okay, so let me confirm. Those of you who did falter here, faltered because you didn't look at the constraints. Is that right? right? And this costed you this question. So from the standpoint of your understanding of how to solve linear inequalities, a system of linear inequalities, you were okay. But you made the mistake because you did not understand, you didn't identify the constraint here. Okay, what you get is x is greater than or equal to minus 5.5. Okay, so the correct answer over here is that x is minimum integer value is minus 5. X is an integer. Okay, so I hope that you will apply, you will intently try to identify the constraints that exist in the system. Okay, let's move on to our next question here. All right, here's question number 3. Can you please click on have not solved yet? All right, here you go. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll here. And there is one more question which is along the similar lines. So I will tell you. So you will find the question almost the same, but you will. I want you to read the question statement and identify the difference between the two questions. Okay. So here is question number 4. There you go. So read the question statement again and make sure that you identify the difference and solve accordingly. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Let's take a look at the previous question here. Question number 3. What is the range of values of z square given that z square plus 4 times z square minus 2 is less than 0? Now, the first thing that I notice is that it's a quadratic inequality. Now, second thing that I notice is that I need to find out the range of values of z square. Now, that's the first thing. We need to find the range of z square and not z. Okay, so that's one very big thing over here. The second thing, what I want to ask you is there any constraint on z square? Is there any constraint on z square? What is it? It's always positive. Absolutely right. It's always positive. Okay. Or rather, it's always non-negative, right? So it's a 0 or a positive number. Now, how will I solve this? What's given to me is that z square plus 4 times z square minus 2 is less than 0, which means that what are the cases in which the product is less than 0? What are the cases in which the product is less than 0 over here? Again, I know that z square plus 4 is always going to be a positive number, right? Z square plus 4 is always going to be positive, which means that the only way that this product is less than 0 is if z square minus 2 is less than 0. Right? So between these two terms, this term is always positive. Right? So for the product to be less than 0, this term has to be negative, z square minus 2. And that's where you actually get your range from. Z square minus 2 is less than 0. That means z square is less than 2, which means you then apply the constraint on z square, that z square is greater than or equal to 0 and is less than 2. And that's the answer, choice D. Now, for those of you who selected choice A, you did not focus on the constraint that z square cannot be negative. That's why you made the mistake. So from quadratic inequality standpoint, you're okay. But you made a mistake because you did not identify the constraint on z square. And that's a conceptual constraint. Okay? Yes, on the GMAT, you only are tested on real numbers. You're not tested on complex numbers. Okay? So that's the mistake that you guys made. Again, if I were to apply the wavy line method, I'll apply it in this manner. But again, you can, once you go through the wavy line method concept, you can figure that out. Okay, let me go through question number 4 now. So first, before I go to question number 4, tell me, what did you learn from question number 3? What did you learn from question number 3? Read the question carefully. Constraints can be hidden. Absolutely. So there are two kinds of constraints. One is the constraint that's given explicitly in the question statement. The other is the conceptual constraint. So a given constraint and a conceptual constraint. Okay, conceptual constraints usually come from, when you're saying a positive number or a non-negative number, or when you say that it's z square. So you have to identify what the question is asking you, and then you have to understand what do you know about the entity that is being asked in the question, and about a square of a number or absolute value of a number, you know that these are non-negative numbers. Okay, so those are the constraints. Okay, so absolutely important to identify constraints. And when I said that the learnings from this session can be applied across the board, across all of quant, it's really from the standpoint of such questions from process skill standpoint. I mean, identifying constraints is something that you need to be able to do across the board for all the sections of quant, right? Reading the question statement properly, trying to figure out whether how you can simplify the question statement. Those are things that are applicable across the board and not just to algebra. Okay, now let's come to the next question, question number 4, in which we change the question slightly. So choice C is the correct answer here too, which about 54% of the class was able to select. Now here what's given to us is if Z is an integer. Okay, so from the previous question we know that the range for Z was Z square. This was the range that we got, right? 0 is less than or equal to Z square. 0 is less than or equal to Z square is less than 2, right? Now, what's given to us is a Z is an integer, which means that the value of Z square could be 0 or 1 based on this constraint, right? And that's why you get the answer as 2. Okay, so again over here, there was an additional constraint that was given to us. Z is an integer. Based on that constraint, we figured out what the values of Z square could be. Okay. All right. Let's now move on to our 700 level questions, and here is question number 5. And let me bring the poll here. Can you click on have not solved yet, please? Okay, before I move to 700 level questions, how are you guys enjoying the session? Okay, good. Very nice. Wavy line is a little wavy. Yes, I understand that. Don't worry about it. I know there are those little concepts that just stick in your head that, oh, let me learn that. But again, there are things that are much bigger than that. Okay, so don't worry about it. It's just a method to apply your concept. It's just a concept taken into a method. That's it. Okay. So, but let's focus on the application part of it. A bit fast, but we have constraints. Absolutely. That's a good contextual statement there. All right, so let's move on to our next question, question number 5. Go ahead. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Now I figured out that this question was taking, that you guys were stuck on this question, and it was taking a lot longer for you to solve it. What was going on? At what point were you stuck here? Okay, what's the meaning of positive difference? One was greater than, the other was less than inequality. Okay, okay. The answer that I got was not in the answer choices. How to find minimum values of x and y. Okay, all right. Let's look at this in a step-by-step manner. What we have been given is a system of linear inequalities, okay, and very rightly observed, one is greater than sign, the other is less than sign, okay. So what else is given to us? That, okay, what we need to find is the positive difference between minimum value of x and minimum value of y. Positive difference, all this means is that you take the difference of the terms and you figure out what the positive difference is. So essentially you multiply it by by a negative sign there, right? So you need to find the positive difference there, okay. Now what's the constraint given to us? X and y are positive integers. That's a very important constraint, the constraint that's given to us. Now the first thing is that we bring both the inequalities in the standard form. Okay, x plus 2y is greater than 20. Okay, and so what we get is x plus 2y minus 20 is greater than 0. That's the first inequality. Second inequality, 3x minus 30 is less than minus y. So I bring all the terms on the same side. Then I have to make sure that both the inequalities here have the same sign, right? Greater than sign here. So I multiply both sides over here with negative sign, with a negative number, and I get minus 3x minus y plus 30 is greater than 0. Because when I multiply both sides by a negative number, the sign of the inequality changes, and that's what I want to do. Okay, so I need to change the sign of the inequality. That's why I'm multiplying both sides by negative number. Okay, so I do that. Now I solve these two inequalities, okay, and I do my processing here. I take away so I do processing and I bring it in the form such that I have only one variable. What I get is y is greater than 6. That's one value that I get, okay. Now I do other processing here and I get the range for x, okay. X is less than 8. So my goal, first of all, is to find the range of x and the range of y from these two inequalities. That's my first goal, okay. Now once I have that, what I do is I need to find the minimum value of y. Now if y is a positive integer and y is greater than 6, then what is the minimum value of y? Absolutely, it's 7, not 6, it's 7. Remember the inequality, y is greater than 6. Okay, so the minimum value of y will be 7. Now let's take a look at x is less than 8. If x is a positive integer and x is less than 8, then what is the minimum value of x? X is a positive integer, not a non-negative integer. It's a positive integer, which means that the minimum value of x is 1. Okay, so now you have the minimum value of x, you have the minimum value of y. What you get is you need to find out the difference between the two. The difference is simply 7 minus 1, which is 6. Okay. Again, you could do 1 minus 7, that's minus 6, but you need to convert that into a positive difference, so you multiply that by minus 1. That's the only thing over here. Essentially, you have to find the difference between the two. Okay. So 6 is the answer here. Choice D. Choice E, sorry. Now, at which point did you guys falter? There are multiple, there's a lot of processing here. The first level of processing is bringing the two inequalities in the standard form. Again, that's the conceptual understanding. Okay. Now, which step did you falter on? Minimum value of x is equal to 1. Okay, why is the minimum value of x not 0? Because of the constraint here. X is a positive integer. 0 is not a positive integer. 0 is a non-negative integer. Okay. I wasn't sure if y minus x can be done or if only x minus y was being asked. Okay. All right. Either which way, minus 6 cannot be the answer because you need to find out the positive value of it. Okay. How x is less than 8, you weren't able to. So for those of you who were not able to get to y is greater than 6 and x is less than 8, which is the range, the two ranges that we had to figure out, my feedback to you is that you need to work on solving system of linear inequalities. Okay, especially because you got confused, you may have gotten confused by the different signs here, right? So that's my feedback. Okay, for those of you who were not able to get from this point here, right, from the solution of the ranges to what the minimum values of x and y are, keeping in mind the constraint over here that x and y are positive integers, for you guys, the feedback is that you need to be able to identify the constraints properly and apply those constraints. Okay, and again, what I'm telling, for those of you who were not able to understand the positive difference, again, you need to translate the language that's there in the question statement into proper mathematical form. So there are three main faltering points here. Okay, so let me ask you this. How many of you answered this question incorrectly because of not being able to solve the system of linear inequalities? Okay, so quite a few of you. Okay, how many of you, so obviously these, because you weren't able to get to y is greater than 6 and x is less than 8, then the further steps became unimportant to you because again, you weren't able to get to that point. Okay, now for those of you who made the mistake in getting to x is equal to 1 or y is equal to 7, click yes. Okay. All right. Now, for those of you who made the mistake in figuring out who got to x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 7 but faltered at the difference part. Okay. Now, notice what we are doing here, and this is not just related to algebra. What we are doing here is we are identifying why you got the question correct and why you got the question wrong. And let me ask you this. If this question appeared in one of your practice sessions and you got this question wrong, what is the message or what is the identification that you're going to do in the error log for the mistake? What are you going to write in your error log? If you got this question wrong in one of your practice sessions and you identified that you got it wrong, what are you going to log in your error log? The correct answer here is which out of the 3 steps you made a mistake. Absolutely, that's the correct answer. You have to explicitly state which step did you falter on. Okay. If you simply write this as I made a mistake in a question in linear inequalities, that is a very, very broad aspect. You don't know which step you faltered on. For example, if you faltered on step number 2 over here where you got the answer here, but you had to translate that into applying the constraints, then even if you write linear inequality, that's not going to give you any specific information because what you missed out on was that you weren't able to identify the constraint. Okay, so it's very, very important for you to identify exactly why you get the question wrong, and that's why that's where the significance of a detailed solution comes in handy. If the solution itself is not detailed, then you won't be able to figure out at which step you faltered. But if the solution is as detailed as what you see on the screen, you will know why you faltered, and you will be able to make that determination on and log that determination in your error log, and then pay more attention to the faltering points. Okay, so I want you guys to start doing that from now on. All right, so now let's move on to next question. And now this question, I will warn you, it is a very, very calculation intensive. When I say calculation intensive, it's just very involved. Okay, so I'll give you some hints. What I want you to do is, I want you to first, okay, so let's do this, because if I give you all the time, it's going to take a lot. You're going to get really a little bit frustrated. So let's figure out the solution to this question up front right now. Figure out the strategy to solve this question. First, read the question. If R and S are variables such that this inequality and this inequality holds true, which of the segments best represents the overlap zone for values of R and S? So tell me, what is it that we need to find out in this question? Don't worry, I'll give you guys a chance to solve this question, but I just want to come up with a strategy together before I send you off to solve the question. Yes, you need to find out the range for both R and S. Absolutely right. You need to find out the range of R and S. Now, the overlap zone is simply the common parts of the range of R and S. That's what is the overlap zone. That's it. But at the high level, right now what you need to find out is the range of R and the range of S. Absolutely right. Now, what is the form of the inequality here? Observe this inequality and tell me, or observe both the inequalities and tell me what is the form. What kind of inequality is it? We know linear inequalities, we know quadratic inequalities. Which type of inequality are these? Okay, no, it's not directly a quadratic inequality. Why? Because even if you solve this, what you get is, in the numerator you're going to get s square minus r square, but in the denominator also you have r square s square. Right? So it's not exactly a quadratic inequality in the form that we know of, right? Because in a quadratic inequality, we should be able to get, in order to solve a quadratic inequality, we should be able to get it in a factored form. We can't really get this in the factored form. Okay. Now, if you think about it, so here is the approach that I'm telling you. Okay, and obviously you need to be able to come up with this approach on your own, and I see one answer here. Simply substitute 1 by r square as x. Absolutely right. Okay, so I want you to substitute 1 by r square as x. Okay, and likewise 1 by s square as y. So when you do that, you will get it in a form of linear inequality. You solve that and then you move on to bring back r square into the picture. Okay, so I've given you this hint. Okay, now I have a question. How to know in advance? Not possible in factored form. Again, you need to work on your quadratic inequalities concept so that you understand what a quadratic inequality is. If you have r square and s square together, that is not going to be a quadratic inequality. So you need to understand the concept behind it. Okay, so definitely go back into the concept file to understand that. But for now, for the sake of this session, so that you can understand the learnings from this question, I want you to take that as a given. Okay, which again, that's a conceptual gap that you need to bridge. Okay, so the step one now is to first substitute 1 by r square as x, 1 by s square as y, and then start solving it. Okay, so that's my hint to you. You already know what it is that you're trying to find out, the range of r and the range of s. Okay, so are you guys now clear about this question? Clear about the approach that you have to use for this question? Good. Now go ahead and solve it. Can you please click on have not solved yet first? Okay, go ahead and solve it. Alright guys, I'm going to give you 20 additional seconds. Alright, I'm going to end the poll. So I can tell that you guys did have a problem with this question. So where were you guys stuck? Calculating the range after x is greater than 4. I didn't get x is greater than 4. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this. So we already talked about the approach here. Okay. So these are the two inequalities that we got. X minus 4 plus y plus 9 is greater than 0, and this one over here. Okay. Now we have to first solve these two inequalities. Now when we solve these two inequalities, what we get is x is less than 16 and y is less than 25. How many of you got to this point? Because this was the first step after we came up with the strategy to solve this question. Okay, so about 87% of those who are responding got to this point. Now beyond this point, so this was a system of two linear inequalities. Now beyond this point, what you get are quadratic inequalities. What you get is 1 by r squared is less than 16. Okay, so you get r squared minus 1 by 16 is greater than 0. You do r minus 1 by 4 into r plus 1 by 4 is greater than 0. How many of you got to this point? And we can start to see a fall off. Now, what was complicated about this? So so we got this, and then we got this for S. So if you were able to get to this point, okay, then how was it that you were not able to get to this point? What did you guys miss out on? And that's the important thing to understand. Okay, why is it that you were not able to get to that? Tell me. Because there's a pretty big fall off here. Now, the question that I'm asking you is for those of you who weren't able to get from x is less than 16 and y is less than 25 to this system of quadratic inequalities. Okay, so again, you have to understand how to process information. Okay. You have to understand that. And see, you have to figure out the roots here, right? You have to figure out the range for R, and you have to identify, okay, in what form can I bring this in? Okay, and here you bring it in the form of your quadratic inequality, and beyond that, it's a relatively straightforward thing. Again, I've shown it in the form of a wavy line method, which you guys can once you learn it, you can then apply it. And really speaking, the range that you get over here is the range of the value of R. So choice A is the correct answer. Because the overlap zone between R and S is nothing but the overlap, the range of R. Okay. All right, so what I want you guys to do is go back, learn the method for wavy line. Again, that's not the critical thing here, but just take a look at these two slides once more. Okay, the approach that we use to solve this question, because again, this is a very intensive question. You may not get a question like this on the test, but the thing that this question teaches you is that how do you start from a complicated looking expression and how do you bring it in the form that you are familiar with, and how do you process it step by step? How do you identify another non-familiar form, but you try to bridge, you try to put that in the form that you're familiar with? How do you go about doing that? Okay, and again, individual parts of these of this question can very well be asked on the test. Okay, so definitely there's nothing overly complicated about this question, and I want you to focus on this question. I want you to understand the various parts of this question so that you identify how to simplify and bring it in the form that you are more familiar with. Okay. All right, now with this, let's come to our next section, which is the data sufficiency section here, which also happens to be absolute value questions. So let me clear out the polls here. Can you please click on still solving, have not solved yet? Okay, let's go ahead. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so how was this question? Okay, confusing with all the constraints. Okay, so what's given over here is z positive. Okay, that's what we need to find out, whether z is a positive number or not. Okay, what's the first statement? That's so. What else is what's given to us is that z is an integer, and we know that the mod of z is less than 6, which means that z can be any of these 11 values ranging from -5 all the way to +5, which means there are 11 possible values, and some of them are negative, some of them are positive. Okay, so we need to find out, is z a positive number? Now, what's given to us in statement 1? Statement 1 tells us that mod of z minus 2 is greater than 3. Okay, now what does that mean? If mod of z minus 2 is greater than 3, what we know is that if that z minus 2 can be greater than 3 or z minus 2 can be less than -3. That's what we know. So from here we basically figure out what the ranges of z are. Range of z is greater than 5 or z is less than -1. If these two are true, only then mod of z minus 2 will be greater than 3. Again, if you have any problems in visualizing this part, that means you have a conceptual issue with absolute value inequalities. Okay, so you definitely need to look at that concept file. Okay, so now if you take a look at this, what you'll figure out is that, okay, z is greater than 5, right, and z is less than -1. But what do you know from the question statement? From the question statement, what you know is that z, there is no value of z which is greater than 5, right? That's what you know from the question statement, which means that the only case that's possible over here is z is less than -1, which means that statement 1 is sufficient. Okay, so question number 1, so statement 1 is sufficient. Okay. Now, for those of you who rejected choices A and D, okay, I want to understand, why did you reject choices A and D? Why did you feel that statement 1, or how did you arrive at the conclusion that statement 1 is not sufficient to answer the question? Didn't compare it with the given statement. Okay. And that is a very important process step for data sufficiency questions. Okay. You have to keep in mind, you have to take into consideration the information that's given to you in the question statement. That's why we say that you should not hit statement 1 till the time you haven't completely understood the question statement, the information given in the question statement. Because remember, the information in the question statement is not only there to ask you the question, it's also there to give you certain set of information. Okay, so very, very important. Did the statement say x is an integer? Let's take a look at the statement. I'm going to go back to the slide. Z is an integer such that mod of z is less than 6. Is z positive? That's what the question statement said. So before you even started processing statement 1, you needed to process the question statement completely. Okay? All right, let's take a look at statement 2 now. Mod of z is equal to 2, which means z is either +2 or -2. Now again, it doesn't tell me that, it doesn't give me any other information, so I don't know whether z is a positive number or a negative number. Okay. All right. Now I have a question here, z is greater than 5 also, right? Now again, that's where I'm saying what this statement is telling you is, and let me get rid of the annotations, from the question statement, what you have is -6 is less than z is less than 6, right? And what this what this range is telling you, z is greater than 5. Now there is no, and you also know that z is an integer. There is no integer that is greater than 5 but less than 6. That's why this range does not even apply here, because it doesn't meet the information that's given to you in the question statement. Whereas if you take a look at this range here, z is less than -1, this definitely applies over here, and what you get is a more well-defined range of z in which all the values of z are negative. That's why you can answer the question here. Okay? Alright, so what's your learning from this question? What's your learning from this question? I need a little bit more specific. Double check constraints, that's right. You have to understand the question statement. Absolutely right. You need to understand the question statement. You have to take the information from the question statement, because that's a given. Those are the constraints for your entire question. Okay. Now, if you are having problems in approaching data sufficiency questions, then you need to go through the application files. That's an absolute must. Okay, but first you need to make sure that you understand the concepts. Now remember, preparing for quant, the way preparing for verbal requires you to build a certain set of core skills, and then you do a higher order application of those. If you think about it, are any of the concepts that I applied new to you? Is there anything in question that you cannot solve? Anything in this question that you're not aware of? The reason why you were not able to solve this question is because you were not able to apply those concepts in the manner that you are supposed to apply. And that's why the application becomes so very important. And that's why you need to focus on the application part. That's the number one mistake that people do. They don't focus on learning the application. Okay? But you can see now that despite having all the conceptual understanding, majority of you were not able to solve this question. Why? Because you didn't know how to apply those concepts. All right? Okay, so now let's take a look at our next question. The second last question in the session. So let's get everyone to click on have not solved yet. All right, here you go. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, let's solve this. The question statement simply asks us to find is A less than B. As simple as that. Nothing much to process here. The next, so statement 1. Mod of A minus B is equal to B minus A. Okay. Now, if B minus A, so you take a look at the right hand side, is equal to mod of a number, what can you say about B minus A? It's a non-negative number, not just a positive number, it's a non-negative number because it can be equal to 0 as well. Absolutely right, B is greater than or equal to A. Okay, so essentially what we are saying is if mod of x is equal to y, then y is equal to, what we are saying is y is equal to absolute value of a number, and absolute value of a number is always greater than or equal to 0, which means that y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so that's what we are saying over here, that b minus a is greater than or equal to 0, which means b is either greater than, which means that b is greater than or equal to a, which means b is either greater than a or b is equal to a. So we don't know if statement 1 is sufficient. Okay. Now for those of you who selected choices A or D, you made a mistake thinking that mod of a number is a positive number. You didn't consider the case that B can be equal to A in this as well when mod of a number is equal to 0. Okay, so again, this one is a simple conceptual error. You understand the concept here, but you're not 200% clear about the concept, and that's why you got this question wrong. Okay. So again, you know that mod of a number is positive, but you don't know that, okay, it's non-negative. 0 is also included there, and that's why you faltered over here. Okay, and that's why I say DS questions, they don't test any new concept. Okay, the concept application exactly the same, but you need to have that 200% clarity in terms of the concepts. Okay, you need to know, okay, it's y, so you made a mistake over here simply because you didn't know that y can be equal to 0 here as well. Okay, all right, now let's take a look at statement 2. Statement 2 says that a divided by b is less than 1. Now, can I do simply that a is less than b? Can I simply do a is less than b? I simply take b on the other side and I can say a is less than b. No, why can't I do that? Why can't I do that? Absolutely right. We don't know. We can't do that because we don't know. What am I doing when I'm saying a is less than b here? I'm multiplying both sides by the number b. Now, I don't know if b is positive or negative, right? So I don't know what the sign of the inequality will be. So I cannot do that. Now, so basically, that's the property that I use here. If b is greater than 0, if b is positive, then I can multiply both sides by b and I can get a is less than b. However, if b is less than 0, then when I multiply both sides by this negative number b, the sign of the inequality changes and I get a is greater than b. Okay, so which means that I cannot answer the question which is asked in the question statement. So statement 2 is not sufficient. Now I can definitely combine both the statements and what I get is the common parts over here, which tells me that a is less than b, which means that both conditions together are sufficient. So choice C is the correct answer here. Okay. So again, was there anything over the top in this question? Any concept that you didn't know? So why did, I'm assuming that the 5 people who selected choice C selected it for the right reasons. So why is it that only 5 of them could answer the question correctly and all of you could not? It's the game of application. Okay, and that's what you need to learn. That's what you need to focus on. Okay, so what's your learning from this question, guys and girls? How do you know A is less than B in statement 1? I'm simply applying the concept of modulus. Okay, all I'm saying is B minus A is equal to modulus of a number here. Okay, B minus A, the right hand side is equal to modulus of a number. Okay, now what is the property of modulus of a number? Now this number can be anything. It can be A minus B, it can be X minus Y, it can be X plus Y, it can be X, it can be anything. All we are using this is that B minus A is equal to mod of a number. And we are utilizing the concept that we know of, that mod of a number is a non-negative number. Right? Once you open up the modulus, what you get is a non-negative number, regardless of what the value inside it is. Right? Because all we are concerned about is A less than B or not. Right? So now what I get is B minus A is greater than or equal to 0 from the modulus property, which means that B is greater than or equal to A. That's all I'm doing here. Okay? Now, if there was some additional constraint specified, then that's a different thing. Okay, but in this case, that's not the case. Okay? All right, so now let's move on to our next question here, the last question in this session. Again, a similar type of question. I want you to keep the learnings from the previous question intact so that you can solve this question correctly as well. You can solve this question, you can attempt this question in the right manner. All right, go ahead. Okay, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, let's solve this question. Again, as I said, it's very similar to the previous question. So it's almost like reinforcement of what we learned in the previous question. Is z greater than 2? That's all we need to figure out. Okay. Now, what do we get from this statement here? Mod of z minus 2 whole square is greater than 4. Now, this, if you think about it, is there any purpose of the mod here? Is there any purpose of modulus over here? Not really. Why? Because z minus 2 whole square is always a non-negative number, right? So you take a non-negative number and you take a mod of it, it's going to still remain a non-negative number. So you're not really getting anything more by adding that modulus there, right? So essentially what you can say over here is that z minus 2, and I apologize for this mess up, this is really square. There's some yeah, so z minus 2 whole square is greater than 2 square. So all you get of all what you can get from this absolute value inequality is simply a quadratic quadratic inequality, which you can solve when you get z minus 4 into z is greater than 0. When you figure out the range for this, what you get is z is less than 0 and z is greater than 4. Again, don't mind the wavy line method here. Once you learn it, you will be able to get to this in a rather quick manner. Okay, so the range that you get is z is less than 0 and z is greater than 4. It doesn't tell you whether z is greater than 2 or not. Okay, which means that you cannot solve this you cannot, statement 1 is not sufficient because you don't know in which range this the value of z, because z can be either less than 0 or z can be greater than 4. Okay, so statement 1 is not sufficient. Now, let's take a look at statement 2. Now, statement 2 is along the lines of the previous statement 2 in the previous question. Mod z is equal to mod of a number. Now, this is what I was talking about. This number can be anything. It doesn't matter. Okay, but what you get out of this is that z is greater than or equal to 0. Once again, z can be greater than 0 or z can be equal to 0. You don't know for sure if z is greater than 2, which means that statement 2 is also not sufficient. Now, when you combine these two statements, what you get is a definite answer to the question, because what you get is z is greater than 4. Okay, and what you basically, for all of these statements to be true, for all of these cases to be true, the only case that's possible is z is greater than 4. So you get choice C is both the conditions are sufficient. Okay, so again, similar stuff what we talked about earlier. Okay, it's just what you have to focus on is once you have that 200% clarity in concepts, what you need to focus on is how do you apply those concepts. Okay, and quite frankly, you can improve from any level of quant score to that Q50 or that Q51. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you some success stories of people from different starting points and how they were able to get to their target scores in quant. The first success story is for people who think they're really good in GMAT quant. Okay, and you should read the student's review on GMAT Club, Krish. Krish had always done well in quant, but he was stumped by the test. He constantly faltered while answering GMAT questions, falling in those familiar traps. Frustrated with the lack of progress, he decided to change his approach, and he started to follow a methodical approach, even changing his approach drastically for DS. After making these changes, he was able to improve his quant score to 51, the highest possible, and he was able to get to a total GMAT score of a 740. Let's take this other second success stories of Leonardo, someone who had not been excellent for GMAT Quant and who was stuck at Q45 despite trying really hard. He needed a high quant score because he wanted to apply to finance-focused schools such as NYU Wharton as well as schools such as Stepper. To improve beyond Q45, Leonardo adopted a methodical approach. He started focusing on constraints, something that we have learned in this session, showing his work on paper. Once he had the approach right, he made extensive use of analytics that Quant Scholarium provides to isolate the areas he needed to improve on, something that we learned upfront in the beginning of the session. Okay. Then he used the custom quizzing feature to ensure that he had actually improved. Now, because of his good quant score and excellent verbal score, he was admitted to Wharton, Stern, and Tepper, and he's right now at Wharton. Now, this third success story is of an individual who was extremely weak in quant. His starting score was Q30, a mere 20 percentile. Mazibar, and that's his BTG, Beat the GMAT Forum name, spent a ton of time reading quant books but was not able to improve. He benefited from the progressive learning architecture at e-GMAT in which he was able to cement his basics before taking on difficult questions. And in his case, when the basics were not strong, he was given appropriate feedback from the system. Mazibar was able to improve to Q45, which is 59 percentile in quant, and this was a huge improvement over his starting score. Now, this last story is again an amazing story of an individual who had an extremely strong determination to study at top B schools. Okay, he started at Q38, which is coincidentally 38 percentile on GMAT Quant. He realized that he needed a stellar quant score to get an admit from Wharton and GSB Chicago. And the only way to improve from such a low score was to truly focus on learning, which he did using the video lessons. He was short on time, so he used analytics and Quant Scholarium to isolate the areas where he needed most help. Like Leonardo, he used the custom quiz feature to ensure that he did indeed improve on these topics. So frankly, to ace GMAT Quant, you need to focus on learning the concepts and getting those concepts to that 200% clarity level and then applying those concepts in the right manner. Okay? So again, make sure that you have that 200% clarity. Solve questions in a step-by-step manner. Don't rely on tricks because tricks don't work. Till the time you don't have that solid, this is what I'm going to do in step 1, this is what I'm going to do in step 2, you will not be able to ace GMAT Quant. Okay. Be an active reader of the question statement. Translate the information. Absorb the information appropriately. Okay. Trust the test maker, as I said earlier, he's not going to throw anything at you that you can't handle. At the same time, trust yourself. Okay, if you have prepared in the right manner, there is nothing that can stop you from answering that question correctly. Okay, the key thing is, have you prepared in the right manner? Okay, have you focused on the right level of clarity from the concepts? Have you focused on the right level of right process application? Okay. So as long as you do that, there is no reason why you would falter in quant. Okay. Now for the next steps that I'm going to recommend, you to go through these concept files. For those of you who are not as yet e-GMAT students, all these files are available to you in the free trial. In addition, you should solve the practice questions that I will share with you in the PDF here, and then definitely try your hand on the questions that are included in Scholarium in your free trial. For all the students, I would recommend going through the algebra course from step 1, from module 1 onwards, and again focus on the things that we talked about in this session. Look at those concept files, get that 200% level clarity, solve the application file questions. Make sure these application files and these practice files have been placed at appropriate points by putting it based on how much we want, based on the difficulty level of the concepts that you've learned, difficulty level of the application. Okay, these are all in progressively increasing order of difficulty. Okay, so solve them You don't remember when we earlier said that people who learn from books, they have to rely on solving thousands and thousands of questions, and that's not really an efficient method of getting to your end goal. That's a very brute force method. Now, if the beauty of these application and practice files is that you have a specific set of questions which are purpose built to be answered at that point in time when you have learned that particular set of concepts, okay, with the right difficulty level. That's the beauty of these application and practice files. You get the right kind of practice at the right kind of time, okay? So definitely focus on that. All right, and again, as I said, there are 2 practice questions included for you, so definitely once we share the PDF, you would be able to access those practice questions. And with this, we've come to the end of this session. And while I share the files with you, I will request you to put in your feedback in this poll here. Let me bring the poll. So if you can put your feedback here, what you liked in the session. I'm going to take this one away from here. That would be wonderful. And I'll also would like to get your ratings for this session. All right. Now, is Coloranium an extra service? No, it's included in your GMAT online package. So it's not an extra service. All right, let me also share the session presentation with you over here. Should I study quant alone, verbal alone, or both of them together? Unless you are preparing full-time, I don't want you to be studying 2 sections together, okay? Only if you're preparing full-time, you can dedicate half of your day. By full-time, I mean you're preparing for 8 hours a day during the weekdays. Only in that case I can allow you, again, quote unquote, allow you to study both sections together. And there is a reason for that. There is a reason why we don't want you to be preparing for 2 subsections or 2 sections at the same time, because again, you are absorbing a lot of new material. You are learning the application. And whenever you're learning application, you have to keep your mind fresh for learning just the application on that particular subsection. Many a time students start preparing with SC, they think that they've learned a set of concepts, that they're ready to now start learning concepts of CR. No, definitely don't do that. That's an absolute no-no. Okay, so definitely you have to focus on learning one subsection at a time. Only in the case that you're working for 8 hours, you're preparing for 8 hours on every weekday, only in that case will I be okay with you doing half-time verbal, half-time quant. Okay, that I won't say do half-time number properties and half-time algebra, no, because then that's going to create a mess in your mind. You can do sentence correction in the morning or number properties in the evening, that's fine. Okay. I would rather you do one section at a time, finish it off sooner than extending both sections for a long time. All right, should I? So that's taken care of. The actual GMAT questions are less tough than these, right? No, these do, except for that last question in the problem solving section, the 1 by r square minus 1 by s square. Except for that question, all the other questions are well within the scope of what is tested on the GMAT. Even that question, the 1 by r square minus 1 by s square, the overlap range question, as I said, in parts, you can definitely, any of those parts of that question can definitely be posed on the test. Okay. Okay, I'm an e-GMAT student. I've completed almost all the quizzes in quant section. How shall I progress now? Anirban, send me an email. I will, the next step, if you've done, so there are 3 learning methods. There are 3 phases in your learning. The first phase is where you learn the concepts, right? And you learn the methods. I believe you have done that that phase appropriately. Again, I'll have to make sure that you have to make sure that you've done it in the right manner. By right manner, I mean, have you scored the right score in all the concept and the application files and the practice files? If you've done that in the right manner, then the next step for you is to do cementing of those methods. And for that, you utilize the custom quizzing feature. You start off with medium difficulty level questions. You don't time yourself. You give yourself sufficient time to answer those questions, right? Because what the last thing that we want to do is put you under timed pressure when your ability has not as yet developed to that right level. Okay, so so definitely that's something which you need to do. Cementing of methods need to be done in the right manner. Okay, so write to me so that I can send you an email with regards to how is it that you should be cementing your methods. Once you're done cementing your methods, then the third phase is to do test readiness, and you figure out how to do test readiness utilizing ability quizzes, utilizing mock tests, and Sigma X mocks is the way to go, or you can take GMAT prep mock tests as well. Okay, so I will wait for your email, and we'll take it from there. Will the Quant Online also have a step-by-step program to achieve the target score? Yes, for Quant, you will have the step-by-step program to achieve the target score. What is the best practice to do in Quant? Again, the best practice source, I believe that's what you're asking, is e-GMAT Quant course. You have the course in which you learn the concepts and the application. Then you have Scholaranium, wherein you do the cementing of methods and the test readiness. Okay. If I'm a beginner, you suggest to take up each module separately, or should I take GMAT Online bundle and use the PSP? Well, if you are a beginner, I would say take up GMAT Online, right? Take up GMAT Online, you create your personalized study plan, and then you decide, do you want to do verbal first or quant first, right? And then you basically carry forward with the plan that you decide utilizing your PSP, your personalized study plan. How is the suggested way to be prepared in GMAT? Again, as I just walked you through the three steps in the learning architecture, you need to do each and every step in the right manner. Okay. Okay. So Aldo, what I would recommend is that you write to us. Okay, given that you will be preparing for the test after a long hiatus from your studies, I would say you need to, don't just do Scholaranium, because you need to, again, you need to understand the role of each and every module, each and every entity in the e-GMAT course. The course helps you to learn the concepts. The course helps you to learn the application. Scholaranium helps you to cement the methods, okay? And then mock tests and ability quizzes in Scholaranium help you towards test readiness, okay? At any point in time, a student will need all of these three resources. Now, the extent to which you utilize these three resources will depend upon what your starting and your target scores are. For example, if your starting score is let's say less than 25 percentile, then you definitely have to spend a lot of time in the first phase, that is in the e-GMAT course. Okay, if let's say your starting score is 65 percentile, then you would not spend as much time on your on the course. You will spend more time on Scholaranium. You will identify your weak areas from the custom quizzes that you take in Scholaranium, and then bridge those weak areas by going through the course that you see in the first phase. Okay, now let's say your starting score is, let's say, 55 percentile, your ending score, your target score is, let's say, 65 percentile for whatever reason, right? In that case, you may not spend that much time on Scholaranium, because you may be able to get to that 65 percentile score directly from going through the course itself, right? So again, it depends on what your current and target scores are as to what part, how much of each of the three parts of the e-GMAT course offering will you be using. Okay. Demo possible? Absolutely, yes. You can, we have a 7-day money back guarantee, no questions asked. Simply, you can purchase the course, go through the course for 7 days and see if you like it or not, definitely. Otherwise, the free trial is also there for you to experience all the three parts of the course. Okay. Where can I take up mock test to see where I stand and spot my weaknesses? Sigma X mock test. So when you log into your student account, you should be able to see a tab on the top that says, you should be able to see a drop down that says Sigma X mocks from your course menu. So one mock is available free of charge to everyone. So definitely take that. Okay. When is the right time to attend the webinar for quant and verbal? May I go through the entire module and attend? Yes, Gopi. Usually what we recommend is that you go through these, for example, going through algebra webinar before you go through all the details of the algebra course would be a good idea, because then you get a very solid idea of how to focus when you're going through the course. Okay. Likewise, going through CR pre-thinking webinar it is going to be a value add for you before you dive deep into the pre-thinking concepts or the module. Again, either which way, you will not go wrong. So, okay. All right, so I think with this we've come to the end of this session. If you have any other questions that I haven't been able to answer, please send me an email at payal@e-gmat.com, and I or members of my support team would be glad to answer your questions. And again, keep in mind that you have everything in you to prepare to ace the test. You have everything in the e-GMAT course to ace the test. All you have to do is utilize both the utilities, both the sources, your ability and the course's ability in the right manner to get to your target score. Okay. So I have a question here. I have it for the exam within 15 days. What is your advice? Shall I give more mocks or practice more? Neither. Figure out where you're at. You can't figure out. You can take a mock test. Again, take a Sigma X mock test. That's the only mock test that gives you your starting abilities, your subsectional abilities, without which you are drawing a blank in terms of what is it that you need to prepare. Okay, so take a Sigma X mock, figure out where you're at, okay, and then decide appropriately. If, let's say, you haven't as yet hit your milestones, then I don't see a point in you taking the test. On the other hand, if you feel that you have hit your milestones in most all those topics, but there are a few that are left, then you do your cementing appropriately. Okay, so again, I would say take the mock test and then figure out where you're at. You have your GMAT on the 7th. Anything to say? As I said, same thing applies to you. In your case, you have your test within the next 3 days. If you take a mock test, Sigma X mock again, figure out, have you reached your abilities? If you have, well and good. You basically should take up maybe two mocks before your exam. Don't take up any other mock. Right, one day before the test. Revise from your mistakes. Take the notes that you've taken. Revise your notes. Okay, but that's the case if you have reached your target abilities. If you haven't reached your target abilities, and again, we have to consider all the cases. In that case, I would say it's obviously it will be too late for you to cancel the test, but make the most from your test. And the manner in which you make the most from your test is to set up a strategy for yourself for the test. Let's say, for example, you are, in fact, I had this case from a student a couple of days back. He had reached his target ability in SC once he took the, as determined from his Sigma X mock, but in CR and RC he had not reached. In quant, he was doing better in algebra sections than in arithmetic sections. So what I told him was that you need to take up your strength area, because it's too late for you to cancel the test. So make sure that you get the maximum from this test. Okay, and taking a test in the environment, because you've already invested the money, make sure that you get maximum from it. So I told him to focus more on his strengths. Make sure that you revise SC appropriately, make sure that you revise algebra appropriately, and make sure that you prioritize solving those questions in the test, so that you can prove to yourself that if you invest the right kind of energy before the test on a particular section, you can show the improvement that you get in that. Okay, so do that. Okay. So again, you'll have to analyze you have a your mock score of 680. You'll have to analyze that mock test and make sure that you apply the principles that I've just told. Okay. And if you have any problems, write to me and I will be happy to help you. Okay. All right then. Good luck, everyone, and I'm hoping to see all of you on the e-GMAT platform. And let me know, write to me if you have any other questions. Good luck.